and welcome to Truth Scout. I'll be your guide, Jonathan. For the premiere episode of Truth Scout, I'd like to go over the premise of the show, and then we'll move on to today's topic. Truth Scout's purpose is to cover newsworthy events and relevant topics using facts and evidence from reputable sources. No fake news or opinions dressed up to look like facts on this show, and I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to think. That's the reason why I'm doing this show. The mainstream media stands exposed for many lies, obfuscations, and opinions stated as facts over the years, and in the Trump era, it's kicked into hyperdrive. I'm 100% confident that if you have accurate information, you will come to the right conclusions on your own. I truly believe that the majority of people are good and decent people who want the best for everyone. However, in this climate of deception, they are being manipulated into thinking and supporting things they would reject otherwise if they had all of the facts. It is my hope, if they are told the truth, supported by facts and evidence, they would reconsider their positions, so please share this video everywhere. And with that, let's get on with today's topic, which is election and voter fraud. Is it a myth, or is it only too real? Legally, voting in the United States is supposed to be one person, one vote, and you must be a legal U.S. citizen who is at least 18 years of age. Certain states put restrictions on felons, but that's on a state-by-state basis, and sometimes it can be reversed after time served and perhaps an application in some cases. These requirements aren't unreasonable, and they aren't any more restrictive than any other country on earth. They also serve to protect tax-paying Americans' interests. Expecting elections to be fair and secure is not too much to ask. However, we've all heard the conflicting statements, obfuscations, lies, and some rather curious positions surrounding elections and voting methods and whether or not they can be trusted. But fortunately for us, there is plenty of evidence available to make informed decisions. One of the murkiest portions of the election and voter fraud equation is mail-in voting or vote by mail. These terms are oversimplified in relation to the nuances that exist in voting procedures. Democrats deliberately use these terms to confuse people and blur the lines between two very different concepts. The main people who would use this voting method would be military personnel, since they are rarely in their district and frequently overseas, national elected officials if they are in D.C., and people on business assignment and other people like that. That is very different from what the Democrats are trying to accomplish. They want to just mail out millions of ballots to everyone on their voter rolls, postage paid, whether they are voting or not. Not only is that a waste of taxpayer dollars and paper, because we know everyone doesn't always vote in every election, we will see in this report that millions of ballots have gone missing in just the last 4 elections, and there's proof that some states and counties have more people on their rolls than eligible adults living there. Why would we want to send out extra ballots to people whether they are voting or not? That's wasteful to say the least and should be stopped on that basis alone. Those tax dollars could be allocated elsewhere and it will reduce demand on paper just to waste it. First, let's see how there are many states and counties with more people on their voter rolls than there are eligible adults. This Real Clear Politics article titled 5 states face federal lawsuit over inaccurate voter registrations details that in 378 U.S. counties, voter registration rates exceed 100% of the adult population, meaning there are more voter registrations on file than the total voting age population. According to a new analysis by the conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch, based on data the Federal Electoral Assistance Commission released last year, the new analysis indicates that a minimum of 2.5 million voter registrations are wrongly listed as valid. It suggests widespread lack of compliance with the National Voter Registration Act, which requires states to remove people who have died, moved, or are otherwise ineligible to vote from the rolls. Judicial Watch sent letters to election officials from 19 counties in 5 states: California, Colorado, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, warning that they could face a federal lawsuit for their failure to update voter rolls. 11 of the 19 counties are located in California, which has had habitual problems updating its voter rolls. Last year, Los Angeles County settled a lawsuit and agreed to clean up its voter rolls after Judicial Watch revealed that it had 1.6 million more voter registrations on file than the eligible voting population in the county. The rest of the article details their efforts in Pennsylvania and Kentucky, and I invite you to read it for yourself. Here we have another article confirming it in Investors Business Daily, and the links to all the reference materials will be in the description. We even have an article in the Huffington Post titled, "These 11 Illinois counties have more registered voters than eligible residents." It covers a report by WJBC Radio from Illinois titled, "Report: 17 Illinois counties have dead people registered to vote." Interesting that HuffPo reduced the number in their title, but they got it right in the body of their article, so I guess there's that. Anyway, both of the articles detail the efforts of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, and they found that the 17 Illinois counties had anywhere from 101% to as much as 190%. As if all that weren't bad enough, we even have a dead cat that received a voter registration form. How does that even happen? As crazy as it sounds, it's true, and it can be found in a New York Post article titled, "Voter Registration Form Mailed to Family's Long Dead Cat." And another one in People. Then you have the problem of millions of mail-in ballots going missing, proving it's a waste of paper and tax dollars. Of course I have to prove that, so here we have a Real Clear Politics article titled, 28 million mail-in ballots went missing in last 4 elections. It says between 2012 and 2018, 28.3 million mail-in ballots remain unaccounted for, according to data from the Federal Election Assistance Commission. The missing ballots amount to nearly 1 in 5 of all absentee ballots and ballots mailed to voters residing in states that do elections exclusively by mail. Now, of course, just because you send out millions of postage-paid ballots to names, whether they are dead or alive or even human, it seems, it doesn't mean that there's actual cheating afoot, right? Well, let's just put it this way. There's not much point in having dead people and dead cats on your voter rolls if you're not going to use the names to cheat. However, simple logic and common sense will not suffice, so we must have proof, and so we shall. This one article has 10 cases from the Washington Times in 2016 titled, "No, Voter Fraud Isn't a Myth. 10 cases where it's all too real." All the cases involved serious investigations by groups like the Public Interest Legal Foundation, state officials, and local news affiliates, which tend to be more truthful than the national media, and have resulted in court filings, prosecutions, and jail time. The examples listed run the gamut of examples of voter fraud, including dead people voting, illegal voting, people voting more than once, vote harvesting, including those doing it improperly, and filling out ballots with or without consent, intimidating and interfering with election officers, and even underage voters. Chronicling the article's examples here seems appropriate. Dead people, number 1, dead people voting in Colorado. A CBS affiliate's evidence of voter fraud in Colorado in September sparked an immediate investigation. A report in Denver exposed multiple incidents in recent years where dead Coloradans were still voting. A dead World War II veteran named John Grosso voted in a 2006 primary election, and a woman named Sarah Sosa, who died in 2009, cast ballots in 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. Mrs. Sosa's husband Miguel died in 2008, but a vote was cast in his name 1 year later. Number 2, illegals found voting in Virginia only discovered after they self-reported. A study by the watchdog Public Interest Legal Foundation found in just 8 Virginia counties 1,046 alien non-citizens successfully registered to vote. These aliens were only accidentally caught because when they renewed their driver's license and self-reported, telling authorities they were a non-citizen. This study doesn't even include the metropolises of Fairfax County and Arlington. Moreover, the FBI opened an investigation in the state after 20 dead people turned in applications to vote. Number 3. Some Pennsylvania citizens voting twice. Last year, Pennsylvania's Secretary of State admitted data showed more than 700 Pennsylvania voters might have cast 2 ballots in recent elections, yet said she's powerless to investigate or prosecute double voters. Okay. Nearly 43,000 voters in Pennsylvania had potentially duplicate registrations in either Pennsylvania or other states, data researcher voter registration data crosscheck found. Number 4. Illegal voters uncovered in Philadelphia, half had previously voted. At least 86 non-citizens have been registered voters in Philadelphia since 2013, and almost half of them have cast a ballot in a recent election. Watchdog Public Interest Legal Foundation noted this month. The number was only turned up after officials received specific requests from the voters themselves to remove their names from the rolls. This is just the tip of the iceberg, Joseph Vander Holst, the Watchdog's attorney, told LifeSet on October 5th. Who knows how many are on and don't ask to be taken off. Number 5. Voter rigging triggers probe in Texas. This week, allegations of voter fraud in Tarrant County, Texas prompted a state investigation. The suit focuses on mail-in ballots, which allows for people to vote from their homes without any ID or verification of identity. There's concern of so-called vote harvesting, where political operatives fill out and return other people's ballots without their consent. Indiana voter fraud investigation grows to 56 counties. Number 6. According to a local NBC report, Indiana State Police are in the midst of a statewide investigation into possible voter registration fraud. Police believe there could be hundreds of fraudulent voter registration records with different combinations of made-up names and addresses with people's real information, NBC 12 reported. Number 7. 3 under investigation in Oklahoma for voting twice in the presidential primary. An investigation is underway into 3 Comanche County, Oklahoma residents who voted twice in last week's presidential preferential primary, according to a local ABC 7 news station, KSWO. All 3 submitted absentee ballots before showing up to their polling place on March 1st and voted again in person, the report said. The Comanche County Sheriff's Department is investigating the case and will interview all 3 of them before handing the case over to the district attorney. Number 8. Election fraud in Kentucky. A Franklin County grand jury has indicted a Pike County man in June on multiple felony counts of election fraud in connection with last month's statewide primary. Keith Justice, 50, has been charged with 4 counts of intimidating an election officer and 1 count of interfering with an election officer in Pike County. Underage voters found voting in Wisconsin's presidential primary. Brown County election officials in April found 6 cases where underage voters cast a ballot in the state's presidential primary. County Clerk Sandy Juneau told a local reporter that 6 17-year-old students registered and voted. Despite 5 of the students presenting a valid ID, poll workers never looked at the date of birth on them or on the registration forms they filled out, Ms. Juneau told local news website wearegreenbay.com. In one case, the student used a report card as identification. Number 10. Voter registration cards sent to illegals in Pennsylvania. The Secretary of State's office in Pennsylvania sent 2.5 million voter registration postcards to people who are not registered voters but are licensed drivers. Secretary of State Pedro Cortez admitted to the House of Representatives that 7 people had reported that they received voter registration cards in error, self-reporting. State Rep. Darrell Metcalf, a Butler County Republican who chairs the State Government Committee, said in September testimony that there are several problems with the state's voter registration system. There's certainly the potential for hundreds, if not thousands, of foreigners here legally and illegally to be on our voter rolls, and a certain percentage who are casting ballots, Mr. Metcalf told LifeSet. We've got a lot of integrity issues that need to be addressed. Another case that proves the need for intense scrutiny of mail-in voting and absentee ballots comes from Palm Beach, Florida. In this Sun Sentinel article titled, "Mail-in Ballots Make Voter Fraud Easy. I Know Because I Did It." The reporter details how she decided to test the system and asked for 3 voter registration applications. She filled them out, listing 3 different names, 2 that she pulled out of her head, and her own name. She listed her real date of birth and made up dates of birth for the other 2. On the lines where the application asked for a driver's license number or last 4 of social security number, she wrote none, as the instructions said to do if a person had neither of these. A few weeks later, she got 2 notices back, saying the applications for her name and one of the fictitious names could not be processed because a driver's license number or social security number was not provided. She also received a new voter information card for the other fake name. On the outside of the card, her mailman had circled the name and address and written in a question mark in pencil, but he put it in the mailbox anyway. More on the Postal Service later. She checked the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections website, and sure enough, there was the bogus name listed as an eligible voter, an author who existed in history but was not alive today. Not long after, with an election approaching, she called the Supervisor of Elections, gave the false name, and asked for an absentee ballot. The employee on the phone asked for information on the initial application and agreed to send it. The absentee ballot, for a long dead person used under false pretenses, appeared in the mailbox soon after. The article goes on to show 2 other examples, one Republican and one Democrat. In the Republican example, a political operative working for North Carolina Republican congressional candidate Mark Harris was charged with fraud for directing a group of people to fill out up to 1,000 absentee ballot requests on behalf of voters, most of whom were unaware. These people were then collected the ballots and filled them out themselves. Harris defeated Democrat Dan McCready by just 905 votes, and even though it was never shown that the number of tainted ballots was enough to account for Harris's win, the election results were thrown out and a new election was held. Republican Dan Bishop beat McCready in a special election by 2,400 votes. Then we have a Democrat city clerk in Southfield, Michigan, who was arrested and charged with 6 felonies for falsifying absentee ballot records to say that 193 of the ballots in one election were missing signatures or a return date, when in fact they had both. The correct records were found in the trash can in her office. Oopsie daisy. Next, we have another multifaceted article posted on July 30th of 2020 from The Lid titled, "Want Proof Voter Fraud Really Exists? Here's Plenty of Evidence." The article details how, on number 1, on July 24th, The Atlantic reported that 20% of New York City's primary absentee ballots were screwed up. Number 2, on May 26th, the same day that Twitter started using the liberal media to fact-check President Trump about mail-in ballot election fraud, the DOJ announced they were pressing charges against a mail carrier from Elkins, West Virginia, involved in absentee ballot voter fraud named Thomas Cooper. The article references a DOJ release, and True Scout research shows it was covered in the Washington Times. Number 3, in Paterson, New Jersey, a city councilman, a councilman-elect, and 2 of their buddies got caught with their hands in the mail-in ballot cookie jar. An investigation by the Attorney General's Office of Public Integrity and Accountability, OPIA, began when U.S. Postal Inspection Service alerted the Attorney General's office that hundreds of mail-in ballots were found in a mailbox in Paterson. Numerous additional ballots were found in a mailbox in nearby Haledon. Number 4, May 2020. Per the Philadelphia Inquirer, a former judge of elections and Democratic committee person from South Philadelphia has pleaded guilty to accepting thousands of dollars in bribes to inflate the vote totals for 3 Democratic candidates for Common Pleas Court judge in 2015 and for other Democratic candidates for office in 2014 and 2016. Number 5. The Wall Street Journal reported how comedian turned disgraced Senator Al Franken beat Senator from Norm Coleman in 2008 via absentee ballot fraud. How? By means of required audits that always seemed to add to Franken's totals. The fix was in. Number 6. Fox News reports that the Attorney General of Texas says that going back more than a decade and continuing now, around 2/3 of election fraud offenses prosecuted by my office have involved some form of mail ballot fraud. He provided examples. A guilty plea for forging 1,200 mail-in ballot applications, resulting in 700 suspected fraudulent votes in a 2017 Dallas election. Authentic signatures collected from voters under false pretenses. Number 7. In South Texas, a former U.S. Postal Service employee was convicted of bribery in a federal prosecution in 2017 for selling a list of absentee voters to vote harvesters for $1,200. There's those trusty postal workers again. Number 8, the Heritage Foundation published a searchable list of voter fraud cases that includes a URL to the original independent source. The list contains 1,285 cases of voter fraud. At least 220 of those listed involved absentee ballots. The list includes 1,110 criminal convictions, 48 civil penalties, 95 diversion programs, 15 judicial findings, and 17 official findings. And here is that page from the Heritage Foundation. For election and voter fraud to be a myth, there sure are a lot of people being convicted for it and a lot of tax dollars being wasted facilitating it and then prosecuting it. But let's move on. We all know that in response to then-candidate Trump's claims that rampant election rigging and voter fraud was happening, former President Obama famously said our elections cannot be rigged in any way, and to suggest otherwise is crazy. Unfortunately for the shameless political hacks and media shills, talk is cheap, and evidence will always reign supreme. And so it shall this time, thanks to Project Veritas once again. This article on LifeSite News titled, Voter Fraud is a Huge Problem in the Democratic Party. It covers 2 Project Veritas undercover investigations, one into the 2016 Democrat primary and one into the Manhattan Board of Elections. 3 weeks prior to the 2016 election, Project Veritas released 2 videos in which high-level Democrat operatives bragged about running a nationwide voter fraud operation financed by the DNC and the Clinton campaign. They rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders by collusion between the Clinton campaign and the Democrat National Committee. Gee, that doesn't really sound very democratic to me, but I digress. Here are a few quotes from the undercover videos. We've been bussing in people, illegal voters, for 50 years, and we're not going to stop now. We know this is illegal. I think backward from how they would prosecute us and then try to build out a method to avoid getting caught. We implement the plan across every Republican-held state. Our operation causes massive changes in the state legislatures and Congress. Hillary knows what's going on. Regarding the Manhattan Board of Elections, the New York Post reported on Project Veritas' undercover investigation where Manhattan Board of Elections Commissioner Alan Shulkin was caught on camera slamming Mayor Bill de Blasio's municipal ID program as contributing to all kinds of fraud, including voter fraud. Here's more of what Commissioner Shulkin had to say. I think there's a lot of voter fraud. There's thousands of absentee ballots, and I don't know where they came from. In some neighborhoods, they bus people around to vote. They take them from poll to poll. De Blasio's municipal IDs can be used for anything, including voting. The city doesn't vet people who get ID cards to see who they really are. Anybody can go in there and say, I am John Smith, and I want an ID card. A month after his comments were made public, Commissioner Shulkin was told by party officials to hit the road. Seems the Democrat Party isn't very interested in making sure our elections are secure, and will seek to punish or silence those who speak out about irregularities. We also have current House Judicial Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler admitting on camera that he knows from experience that voter fraud is real. In a video referenced in an article on News Punch titled Nadler in 2004, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. He's shown in the video stating, when the machines break down, they vote on paper. They've had real problems, he warned. I want a paper trail. I want paper somewhere, Nadler said. But pure paper with no machines? I can show you experience which would make your head spin. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear it from Chairman Nadler himself.
A point, and I yield to Mr. Nadler.
Thank you. It's a very tempting point. I just, as a very experienced practical politician from New York, feel constrained to observe that in my experience in New York, paper ballots are extremely susceptible to fraud. And at least with the old clunky voting machines that we have in New York, the deliberate fraud is way down compared to paper. When the machines break down, they vote on paper. We've had real problems. So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. I'm simply observing that as a problem. There's got to be a way of getting the best of our methodologies.
But in fact, the MIT studies have shown that hand-counted paper ballots are among the most reliable. And at least if there's a miscount, you can discover it. You can't discover miscounts with these
then
machines.
Maybe optical scan with paper. I want a paper trail. I want paper somewhere. But pure paper with no machines, I can show you experience which would make your head spin.
And we thank you for...
Gee, I wonder what happened, Chairman Nadler, that now the Democrats are changing their mind about that. Anyway, there's also a simple logic thought experiment about photo voter ID subtitled How Democrats Use False Charges of Republican Racism to Justify and Facilitate Voter Fraud. More on that later. Speaking of having nebulous ballots floating around, waiting to land at opportune times, we have a Politico article from July 2020 titled, Former Congressman Indicted on Voter Fraud, Bribery Charges. It shows the Justice Department announced Thursday that federal prosecutors had charged a disgraced former Democrat congressman from Philadelphia with a variety of voting-related crimes in recent years. Michael Ozzie Myers was indicted earlier this week on charges of conspiring to violate voting rights by fraudulently stuffing the ballot boxes for specific candidates in the 2014, 2015, and 2016 primary elections, bribery of an election official, falsification of records, and voting more than once in federal elections, and obstruction of justice. Here is the statement on the charges from the Justice Department. Obviously, these are specific individuals, and Democrats want to send their ballot chaos to homes so people can fill them out, and the Postal Service will bring them back to the vote counters down at the polling place. Super easy, right? And secure, because the Postal Service is totally trustworthy, right? Well, sadly, as we've already documented, no. And we have more examples. Behold, the unfortunate underbelly of the Postal Service. In this local Houston article titled, Postal Worker Caught on Camera Dumping Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nell's Campaign Flyers, he says. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nels says an unidentified postal worker threw away a bundle of his campaign mailers and flyers Friday. Nels learned of the incident from a business owner who called him. The business owner showed Nels video footage in which a postal worker can be seen throwing an object in the dumpster behind a building near FM 359, who attempted to hide the mailers before discarding them. The owner said when he went to go retrieve what was thrown away, he found the campaign flyers and called him. We even have postal workers bragging about their efforts to defraud people of the right to vote via tweets in this Gateway Pundit article titled postal worker brags online about destroying Trump ballots. Here's what he said. I love working at the post office in Columbus, Ohio, and ripping up absentee ballots that vote for Trump. Please know that the poor capitalization of this tweet is his and not True Scout's. He later claimed it was a joke. How convenient and unfunny. Unfortunately, you can't even trust the people at the polling place. We've already seen a few examples listed above, but there's another one that's especially worthy to note in this Politico article titled "Experts: Broward's elections chief broke law in destroying ballots." It details the misadventures of Broward County Supervisor of Elections, Brenda Snipes. Destruction of paper ballots from contested federal elections, sent out absentee ballots to voters that failed to list a popular medical marijuana measure, mailed out about 1,700 ballots that had the word no in Creole where it should have said we for yes. Before the general election, the Republican Party of Florida threatened to sue Snipes for the way in which her office handled the opening of absentee ballots. Snipes is defending herself in another lawsuit over the way the office removes ineligible voters from the rolls. That case, filed in federal court in South Florida by the Conservative American Civil Rights Union, alleges Broward had more registered voters than voting age population. On the witness stand in the federal case, Snipes admitted that some ineligible non-citizens had been on the rolls and a few of them had voted yes. Her legal team also didn't dispute the testimony of a dozen activists who found that the rolls listed voters whose birth dates were listed as 1886 and 1889. Clearly, those people are long dead. And finally, circling back to the LifeSite article, Thought Experiment on Voter ID. Covert voter fraud operations aren't the only way Democrats subvert fair elections. Despite their feigned protest to the contrary, voter ID laws are not racist, nor do they suppress minority voting. How does requiring voters to present a photo ID suppress the ability of any adult citizen to vote? Government-issued photo IDs are easily obtainable by every legitimate voter in America, including those who don't drive. Virtually every voting age citizen already has photo identification, yet Democrats aggressively oppose laws that require photo IDs to vote. Blocking voter ID laws is just another way Democrats knowingly rig elections by facilitating and encouraging illegal voting in all its forms. It lists a few things that do and don't require photo ID. Here are just a few of them. Driving a vehicle, airport check-in, hotel check-in, hospitals and outpatient services, doctor's offices, applying for Social Security, applying for Medicare and Medicaid, pawn shop transactions, federal and state local courts, military bases, donating blood, volunteering at charities, professional applications, college applications, job applications, buying a house, boarding a cruise ship, boarding a train, licenses to hunt and fish, buying cigarettes and alcohol, opening a bank account, applying for credit, cashing a check, getting a library card, visiting Congress, and getting tattoos and body piercings. Is there anyone out there who really believes that every single American doesn't do at least one of the things listed above at some point? Things that don't require photo ID in many places. Voting. It should also be noted that photo ID was required to attend the Democrat National Convention, which is quite ironic given their position on photo voter ID for voting. Democrats claim black people and minorities don't have the wherewithal to get an ID. Does that seem reasonable to you considering all the things that require ID? They traffic in the bigotry of lowered expectations, and sadly, many of their followers fall for it. It's quite sinister, and they're hoping everyone is gullible enough to buy into this craziness or be afraid enough of being called a racist to stay silent about the obvious. Well, True Scout is not going to stay silent in the face of election and voter fraud. So in conclusion, the choice is really yours. This really isn't a partisan issue, nor should it be, especially when all sides claim to want free, fair, and secure elections. We see from everything documented above, it is an indisputable fact that election and voter fraud is happening in every form imaginable, regardless of political affiliation. Anyone who claims otherwise is lying and probably has something to gain, or simply gobbles up the party line with no questions and regurgitates it. Regardless if there were fraud going on or not, simple logic dictates that all Americans should want super secure elections involving only legal U.S. citizens with as much documentation and verification as possible, including photo ID. If we don't keep them super secure, we won't have to worry only about internal fraud. We already know foreign actors from a variety of countries and extractions are trying to sway our elections in various ways. But that is a tangent not in the scope of this report, which is internal fraud and cheating. Anyone who opposes making our elections or anything else as secure as possible clearly has intentions to cheat. What other explanation can there be? Given the stakes involved in voting, namely who our representatives will be and how they will conduct our government's business, including what laws they enact and how they spend our money, and the fact that fraud is happening on both sides of the aisle, it makes sense to have our elections conducted as securely as possible. I'm not here to tell you what to think. My goal is to present you with some cold hard facts so you can make informed choices. I hope it helps. If you think this video was informative, please share it on social media and with any family and friends that you think need to hear it. Nobody likes thieves and cheaters, so let's do all we can to stop people from cheating and stealing elections. Until our next expedition, thank you for watching True Scout. Have a great day. Thank you for watching True Scout. I hope you enjoyed this report. If you found it useful, please help me get the word out and share it with family and friends. You'll find links to all the content referenced in this report in the description box. Join the conversation with your fellow True Scouts on social media for show announcements and related content. Help beat the censorship algorithms with a like, subscribe, and share. The link to my backup channel is in the description so you never miss an episode. Be sure to visit the Cosmic Echoes t-shirts and gear store for fun t-shirts and more. True Scout is a one-man show from start to finish, including research and video production. So if you enjoyed this report and it brought you value, please consider supporting my channel on PayPal or Patreon. Your generous donations will help me dedicate more time to these reports and help fund equipment and internet upgrades to help it all happen faster. The links to donate are in the description. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you again for watching True Scout. Until our next expedition, have a great day.